Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Today, I have Kellen Parker, the Director of Sustainability and Data Insights at Ethic. And today, we're speaking about data opportunities in sustainability. So, welcome to the show, Kellen. I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, definitely. And can you just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the audience more about your background?
My name is Kellen Parker, and I work at Ethic. We are a tech-driven, sustainable investment manager. Previously, I've worked for risk analytics firms, a hedge fund, an environmental nonprofit, as well as a carbon consultancy. Outside of work, I've been involved with waste reduction advocacy groups, and I helped run a zero waste incubator in New York City. I feel very fortunate to work in the sustainability field with such an amazing group of coworkers. I think that it's just the most interesting and pressing problems out there. And there's such an amazing group of people making their way into the field, from art directors to software engineers to writers, quants, philosophers, etc. And I think there's this really liberating permission to speak your mind and a very gratifying way that we talk to people about what their values are and how they can express them through portfolio management and otherwise. So it's a really interesting area.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting to see data being used in so many different areas and industries. And super cool that it's also helping everyone be more sustainable also with this analytics for data and sustainability. So I'm excited to jump more into that with some questions for you on that. And so I want to hear more about your experiences with data and sustainability. So what are some things that you have learned from the field, and what are some best practices to prepare for job opportunities, specifically in sustainability?
Sure. Yeah, I think like a lot of fields, there's just some background best practices. So making things as simple as possible. This, like a lot of fields, is growing and becoming more and more complex by the day. There's a lot of different standards, there's a lot of different techniques. And so just being very clear about what you mean is absolutely essential. I think good communication, like a lot of areas, is really important, especially because a lot of times people have different perspectives and it really makes a huge difference in what we do. You know, sustainability can be very personal to one person and how they express their particular ideas that they're into, or they could just be expressing common ideas from a very particular personal place. And so I think you just want to respect that and understand that, ask a lot of questions, really make sure that you've done all the like data inception input parts of it before you kind of come back with anything. I think one other way that I found that really helps is making sure that you kind of show your work, that you really are very clear on how you came to what your result is, whether it's a recommendation for something to do in the portfolio or whether it's just how you think about these different ideas. People really want to know how you've come up with this, especially because they're getting up to speed on the field generally, but also because, again, like reasonable people can disagree, as my colleague likes to say, and we really want to show a very discrete methodology. So you know that it's based on rigor, that it's based on a lot of research, and showing people like how much effort is put into it, because it really is a tremendous amount of effort.
Yeah, definitely. And so what are some current issues that you see in environment, social, and government sustainability, and how is this used in asset management?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it usually breaks down into two different use cases. One is investor driven, and it's about client values, whether it's that group themselves or an end investor that's come to them and said, hey, we believe in X, and we don't want that in our portfolio, or we do want that in our portfolio because of Y and Z reasons. It could be religious, it could be just related to their own personal experience, et cetera. And those are typically like very different requests, and they can be from people exploring how they might put their values into work in their portfolio, or it could be people that have a long history of this and have done a lot of advocacy and really know exactly in detailed steps. We don't want companies, 1, 2, 3, because we know a lot about them. And I think it's something that's very interesting to see across your landscape, and then to communicate to those different types of investors how you may be able to engage with them and make sure that you're getting the investors that are newer to it to kind of up the scale to understand the different ways this is done, and doing the education, and then showing the more sophisticated investors that you can also kind of handle their use case. And really, it's actually a very old practice. It's been going on for hundreds of years. Religious groups were some of the first to do this kind of divesting use case, and obviously a lot of it accelerated in the 70s with the South African apartheid issue, and it's kind of exploded today with more modern ESG investing and just a lot of broad interest in this investor-driven sustainability process. So the other way is more internally driven by kind of an asset manager, and that's not just related to client requests, but as how they think about their body of investment research and how they think about the market generally. So it's some level of them thinking that this information is actually material, meaning it can affect financial valuations in the market, or at the very least, it's something they should be monitoring for potentially being material. So it means that they think that the carbon emissions of a company actually may affect that company down the line as regulation gets put through, or as investors decide to divest, or something else. Or it could mean that a company getting called out for hazardous waste could actually affect the valuation because of selling based off of the news cycle from them. And really, these managers believe this is a fundamental part of the process and are investigating it to some level degree. I think that those two sides are starting to come together, meaning that clients and investors want to see that it's part of the internal process as well, that it's not just something that they're being humored with to put in their portfolios, or that people are accepting it as just another filter, but that the manager's actually engaging with them on these issues and has their own conception that they're bringing something to the table. It's something that the investor can't do themselves. And so I think that's becoming a big differentiator and a potential differentiator in the market, as people look to where they want to go and how they think about this generally. I think that there's also an interesting historical part of it where, after the financial crisis, people were really obsessed with, finding out what I'm invested in. And there's a lot of more complicated derivative products, from asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, et cetera. And there was a lot of concern over how do we not know what was really involved in this, what was being packaged up, et cetera. I think, as the 2010s got underway, we had things like the 2010 flash crash, where the Dow lost 9% in, I think, 30 minutes. And there's a lot of really interesting processes around how that happened and what caused that. And people started to think more about what high frequency trading has as far as implications for the market, what quantitative investing has for implications for the market. And I think what we're starting to see is more on the focus on the why. Why do we invest? Who do we invest for? What is likely to happen more broadly to us as a result of this as a society? And I think if you told someone, several years ago that there would be publicly traded water futures, they would have been pretty surprised. And clearly, we're starting to see these things permeate through issues, that affect all of us. So I think clearly, like, the investment management profession has come a really long way, and there's a lot of questions being asked that people do not have a background in. And so it's really interesting to see, these kinds of expertise mix into how that's traditionally done, and people are really changing how they handle their process.
Yeah, definitely. And great insight there. And so there's constantly new applications and new technologies emerging in the field right now, especially in the data industry. And so are there any specific new technologies that you're excited to see advance or emerge in just the future or the next coming years?
One thing that we actually kind of joke about as a new technology is the human part of the analysis, just because we feel like we've forgotten that this is just a central component. You see people talking about it more as far as like a human in the loop type of process, but it's incredibly important to remember that we are all people doing these things. Everyone has a bias. Everyone has a certain way they think about issues. And so the really important technology to build is culture around this, around communication, it's process, around how people resolve issues. It's things like really specifying what you're trying to get to, and having a good result of how you build out like a product requirement doc or something like that, of how you get there. And then you kind of approach the natural language processing or machine learning or what have you. You ask a lot of questions so you understand the presumptions that are made as far as the assumptions that are made as far as building these things out. What bias the algorithms may have that you're utilizing. What trajectory you're really trying to get to there, and sometimes just like what the point is of what you're doing. Maybe there's just something, maybe you should scrap the project and do something entirely different because you're not going to get the result that you want. There's some fundamental bias in the data set that you're using, and it takes a human to realize that because of some abstract result that's going to come down the line. So what we're really excited about is putting that focus on people and how they operate, making sure you're engaged and happy. And we've just seen like tremendous results getting the creativity from the group going and really making sure that there's that iterative building, right? I mean, you could have the best technology in the world, and if you have a bunch of miserable analysts, your results probably not going to be very good. So I think that's one of the ones that really kind of excites us. And there's some interesting examples historically. One that comes to mind is that during World War II, there was this group called Statistical Research Group that was operating out of like a small Manhattan apartment in Morningside Heights. And it was a group of like heavy hitter mathematicians. And the Army came to them. A lot of Allied planes were getting shot down from German anti-aircraft fire. And they were debating between, we have a lot of these bullet holes riddling these planes that are coming back, and we can put armor on them, but there's a trade-off, right? The more armor you have on the plane, the less maneuverable they are, the more they're going to use fuel because they're heavier, et cetera, et cetera. And so they came to this, one of the bright stars, this guy, Abraham Wald, and they asked him, okay, like how much armor should we put on? We think we're going to put it on the densest areas of holes, that are getting shot with the plane, and it's the fuselage, and et cetera, et cetera. And his interesting insight was, you actually don't want to put it where the holes are. You want to put it where the holes aren't, because those planes aren't coming back. And is this interesting? There's a bias to your data set. There's something fundamental you're not understanding, which is there's essentially a zero tolerance for the engine getting shot. A small amount of bullet holes are going to mean those planes aren't coming back. And who knows how many lives this has saved. It's still in place today, that general protocol. So it's really interesting to like think further about the data set, to not take just the assumptions that you're given, to think about what your data may be missing, and make sure that you're really asking the bigger questions there.
Yeah, definitely. And having biases in data, it's very tricky to work with, since everyone kind of has their own, as you had mentioned, their own beliefs and values, and kind of working with the data can be kind of tricky and difficult sometimes. So great insight and thoughts there, definitely. And data in general it's not always easy to collect it, because it's not always readily available for everyone to just use and try to play around with, especially in the sustainability data sector. It's difficult to kind of collect this data because it's not always readily available. And so why is it not readily available? And is there something that society or other companies can do to make it more available?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that we certainly think about a lot. The short answer is that it's still voluntary in almost all markets, although there is some legislation working around that, specifically in the EU. So it's only really pressure from investors and advocates that's gotten us even to the point we are today. There are some specific organizations that have really helped us get there. One is CDP, previously the Carbon Disclosure Project, that really pushed a specific standard for how you're going to report your greenhouse gas emissions, specifically carbon dioxide. And there's some other groups that are trying to make this easier, because again, there's thousands of metrics, and a lot of companies do get a lot of requests to report in specific frameworks, or even just specific metrics for different investor groups. They have a big variety there. So there is kind of this like large data set problem, but there's some groups like Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, SASB, that are looking to trim that down. So at least the most material metrics are getting reported for each company. So that means the ones that are most likely to affect their financial valuation. So some groups like that. I think generally it's not just that it's kind of hard to pull the data, meaning a lot of times it comes in like a PDF format in what's called a corporate sustainability report, CSR report, but also that even the metrics that are there aren't always standardized. So there's different methodologies. There's not even just like the tables, you know what I mean? Like it's at different parts of the document. So I don't think there's really a lot of thought about the end users of that, the people that need to take that data and turn it around and do something with it, put it in a database, make it easily updated. There's obviously a lot of time that goes into that, like ETL part of it, to just get it data ready. And I think that's another one where it's really, really important to think deeply about what you may be missing just from pulling from these documents. And then again, what the companies may not be disclosing to you, or how the different methodologies they're using for things like hazardous waste may affect the results that you're getting, because we just don't have, it's different than traditional financial reporting in some ways. It requires a little bit more scrutiny, but there is a whole world of depth below it and a lot of really interesting things you can do on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. Great insights there. And I wanted to talk about the data standard as well. So we're building a community of data enthusiasts and data thought leaders where everyone can just collaborate and communicate with each other. So what is something the community can help you do?
We would love for people to get in touch if they're interested in the space. We are hiring and growing. There's also people that we know through our network that are involved in different types of projects across the space, from nonprofit work, or advocacy groups, or people in financial institutions that are building out their teams, or companies that have openings in their sustainability groups, those types of things. So if you're interested in what you heard today, we'd love for you to reach out.
Yeah, perfect. And where can everyone find you online to connect with you?
Yep. So we are on Twitter at Ethic Investing, one word. You can find us on LinkedIn, and then you can also find us. We publish a bunch of our different insights and thought pieces and updates on ethic.investments/insights.
Yeah, perfect. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io. And thank you so much, Kellen, for joining us. Such a pleasure to have you today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine.